Thank you, Montana Dan. This is Brent Allan Winters, and this is the couple of elders at In Church kicking things around a little.
Welcome, folks, to In Church with Brent Allan Winters. I'm privileged to be considered an elder with Brent. I appreciate the time that I get to have with Brent. And we're going to talk about different topics from time to time. And one topic that I want to talk about today is the lineage of Abraham's seed. And then in Rome, the record was destroyed in the fire. I believe it was Rome. Was that in 70 AD?
Yes.
So how does the children of Israel fit in now? Because in the later book, in the last book, it talks about 144,000 from each tribe. So Brent was you were talking about reading the head note of the Book of Esther. So would you go ahead and do that now, please?
Thank you, Dan.
Or do you have other comments?
Well, yeah, I'll see. I want to read the head note. I like to read the head note. I took a long time to try to hammer this thing out over the years. But this is from the Winterized version of the Bible. A common lawyer translates the Bible from the original tongues. And in that Bible, of course, we call it toward a raw translation. We don't want to cook the book, but we want to deliver it up just the way it was delivered to us in the original tongues. And also, there are over 35,000 footnotes and head notes, and 185, 190 appendices, but head notes. And the head note to Esther, the Book of Esther in the Bible, is the longest head note I have in the Winterized Bible, Dan. The reason it is so long is because the Book of Esther of the Older Testament is there to show us, to mark the beginning of the fulfillment of the promise of the law of God that Yahovah himself would obscure the identity of his people beyond knowing. He would obscure it beyond knowing, and the Book of Esther marks the beginning of that fulfillment of God in earnest. You know, people say, well, God is not even mentioned in the Book of Esther. Well, certainly isn't mentioned overtly, but embedded in the Hebrew text of that book is the name Yahovah in a most clever and obvious way. In the text itself, without saying the name of God outrightly. There's nothing in the book to tell us that the characters, Esther and Mordecai, her uncle, were Christian folk, God's people. The word Christian hadn't come up yet because the Greek tongue wasn't in vogue at that time, but the believers of the Old Testament were just assuredly Christians, as you are today if you're a Christian man or woman born of the Spirit. So were they. And for the same reason, their trust, the only difference was they're looking forward, trusting in the coming Messiah, Jesus Christ, and we're looking back. And both of us do it based upon the evidence. Well, this is evidence. Esther is recorded evidence of God saying, my people Israel, I'm going to obscure their identity, and you won't even know who they are. Let me read some of the things I have here. This is a quote from King Alfred the Great from the head notes of the Winterized version. Listen to King Alfred. This is from the 9th century AD. Alfred was the first real king of England, of the whole of England, not just of a particular smaller kingdom. All the counties, all the shires of England, now called counties, at one time were smaller kingdoms. Eventually, Alfred became over-king because of the invasion of the Danish Vikings, and they needed to solidify their forces and appoint a commander-in-chief at common law, and they did that. Alfred. Listen to what he says. He says, this is a quote, some philosophers say, however, that fate, called veered, we say weird, rules both the luckiness and the unluckiness of every man. But I say, as all Christian men say, that divine providence, called in Old Anglo-Saxon God kunde, God kunde. Divine providence rules over man and not fate, which is veered. And I know that it decrees everything very rightly. They think that everything that fulfills their desire is God. It is no wonder, for they are blinded by the darkness of their sins. But the divine providence, the God kunde, divine providence, understands everything very rightly, though it seems to us, through our ignorance, that it goes wrongly. What is he saying? Well, he's just saying, I believe Romans 8:28. All things work together for good to them that are called according to his purpose. It doesn't say all things are good. It says all things work together for good. Well, let's get to this head note about the Book of Esther, which is about who. It answers the question, can we know who the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are? Abraham, his son Isaac, Abraham's grandson Jacob, the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. Abraham was not an Israelite. Abraham was an Assyrian. Isaac was not an Israelite. Isaac was an Assyrian, the son of Abraham. Jacob, son of Isaac, was an Israelite by the new birth, but not by the birth in the flesh. God renamed him Israel at his new birth. And then all of his sons fathered, each one of his 12 sons fathered one of the 12 tribes of Israel. Here we go. Esther, the Book of Esther, reading from the footnote of the Winterized version of the translation of the Bible. Esther shows God's invisible hand beginning to obscure Israelite identity, according to his promise. Do not allow me to hide the ball. Up front, let me say the conclusion. God promised that we would not know by any evidence the identity of the true nation of Israel, blood descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and God has fulfilled that promise. And nobody today that I've ever found has one shred of reliable evidence that they are a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, outside of popular opinion. That's not evidence. It's promotion. The law of God and Moses promised, Deuteronomy chapter 27:28, that God would obscure and no one would know. They wouldn't even be able to prove it themselves. Blood descendants. Let's keep going. While using melodrama, Esther uses melodrama to lull Israelites into a, no, Esther doesn't. The Israelites yet today use Esther as a melodramatic play to draw Israelites into false hope, or people that think they're Israel. As Jesus Christ sets forth throughout the gospel records, and as the apostles indicate throughout the rest of the New Testament, the fundamentals and therefore the particulars of Judaism are contrary to the Bible standards. The fundamentals of Judaism, which is the Talmud and the Mishnah, are contrary, utterly contrary to the Bible standards. Consequently, beginning with the events, Esther records proselytes to Judaism following Babylonian city law under the label Judaism have not depended upon true law's tandem hitch to protect them and their property, but have depended upon the powers that be's lust for money under usury and its indulgences for the powers that be protection in return. Let me unpack that statement I made here, trying to get it all in one sentence. What am I trying to say? I know, I could be a better writer, but let me try to even make it clearer. Judaism and the people that adhere to that Babylonian religion have no proof that they are Israelites, blood descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. All they have is saying so and promoting the idea. Instead of relying on the protection of God's word, God's law, and getting within that circle of protection, Judaism, since the days of Esther, has promoted the idea that if you convert to Judaism, you can seek the protection of the governments of this world. You see it going on here in America. The unnatural push to pass unconstitutional laws contrary to our common law that say we do not have freedom of speech to criticize in any way politically the actions of the nation that calls itself Israelis. Anti-Semitism, they call it, which is a misnomer as well, is, of course, best defined as anybody that disagrees with a Jew. Well, I have a disagreement with a Jew about something. Oh, you're an anti-Semite. Well, you're this or that. They pull the race card. Well, if you pull the race card and say, well, you're racist against black men, at least you've got something you can look at and say, well, I know who he is. He's not a Caucasian. With the Israelis or the Jews, you can't do that. They say they're descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Most of them knowing full well that's not true. And it starts in the Book of Esther. Historically, it is a fulfillment of the promise of the law that God gave Moses in Deuteronomy. And what Judaism looks for is the protection of government. And they'll do anything to get it. And it doesn't always work. And it never has. The only protection you and I or anybody could ever have, my friends, the only protection is the providence of the maker of heaven and earth through his Son, Jesus Christ. Period. Where could I go? Where could I go? Where could I go but to the Lord? Answer, rhetorical question. There is no place else to go. Esther records the beginning of Judaism's culture of seeking such favored position with the political powers for protection. You have to read the book to understand the fullness of it, but bottom line, millions of Persians in the Book of Esther, not Israelites, Persians, turned Jew. That's the Hebrew word of Esther. It's in the Hethpael stem, and it means that they switched around and went the other way and followed Babylonian Judaism, part of that religious group. Why? To seek protection from the government. Men in federal prisons and state prisons today turn Jew so they can have extra privileges while they're in prison. That's just one example. This is going on all over the world. This is where it started in the Book of Esther. People joining the Babylonian religion called Judaism so they would be protected. And that does backfire off and on through the centuries, and it turns the other way. That shouldn't happen, and you should not be involved in that. And if you are, you will be destroyed. That's not what God says to do and how to deal with false religion, by attacking them. We're just here to understand the doctrines of the Bible. Esther records this beginning. And further, Esther records the beginning of He Happens. That's Yahovah. William Tyndale pronounced it Jehovah, the holy name of God. He happens means He happens. Esther records the beginning of He Happens fulfillment of His promise to obscure beyond finding out the identity of Israelites, true Israelites, that is, the bodily descendants of the man Jacob, later called Israel. Indeed, members of all 12 tribes were scattered. Are the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob still in among men? Without question, they're out there. Who are they? Nobody knows. And they can't prove it. Nobody else can either. And God promised that would be the case. Jesus Christ promised it. Read the gospel records. You'll find there that He was like this, taunting them, knowing they hated Him, pronouncing a terminal curse upon their leaders. And He did. And they murdered Him. And that's why He came, and He knew that. He gave His life up willingly. All members of the 12 tribes were scattered, and before 70 AD, we see in the book of James, that James, an Israelite, half-brother to Jesus Christ, was writing to the 12 tribes scattered abroad. The book of Hebrews is addressed to who? Jews? No, that's the name of a religion. Who is it addressed to in the New Testament? The Hebrews, the Israelites. They were not yet scattered. It was not 70 AD yet. Further, nothing in the book of Esther gives certainty that either of its leading figures, Esther or her uncle Mordecai, were other than devotees of Babylonian Judaism, a Kabbalistic way of life embracing the false religion, law, and government that swallowed the Israelite exiles in Babylon and spread back to Jerusalem, where Jesus Christ and his apostles confronted and denounced its leaders and teaching. To hold otherwise is mere, well, to put it lightly, speculation, but it's much worse than that. But it's nothing. Speculation is no evidence at all. The book Esther shows the Jews' commitment to self-interest while offering no clear evidence of their trust in the coming Messiah. Neither does the book offer any forthright statement of Esther's or Mordecai's faith in Israel's lawgiver. Indeed, to foist true trust upon these two leading figures as a material matter of the book of Esther sidetracks the book's clear twofold theme. Number one, the hidden yet ever-present hand of providence in all the affairs of men, and in particular, number two, God's obscuring of the Israelite people's identity through other nations' anxious embracing of the Jews' brand of Babylonian religion, law, and government called Judaism. Some later English Bible translations call it Jewry, Jewry. If you go to Deuteronomy chapter 28, verses 64 through 68, you'll see that it says, "The Lord shall scatter you among all people," speaking to the Israelites. That's the prophecy of the law of God. Matthew 23:15, Jesus Christ pronounces irreversible doom unto the city law notaries, the scribes, and the Pharisees, the leaders of Babylonian Judaism. He calls them stage actors, hypokritos. For ye compass land and sea. Listen, this was the time of Jesus Christ. Ye compass land and sea to make one proselyte, one convert to Babylonian Judaism. And when he is made, you all make him twofold, more the son of hell than yourselves. That's Jesus Christ speaking. In the providence of God, the pattern here seen in the book of Esther is nations' widespread embracing of Judaism for fear. Why do they do it? For fear of the Jews. Why do people not criticize Babylonian Judaism? Why do they not criticize the political policies and the actions of the state, the Israelis? Why do they not do that? For fear of the Jews. Why did Rand Paul go to Israel, put on a skull cap like a Jew, and stand in front of the Wailing Wall and worship? For fear of the Jews. Why is it the Congress of the United States did the bidding of the Jewish rabbis that came back during the Bush years and demanded that they pass legislation recognizing the Noahide laws? For political fear of the Jews. I was doing okay in politics, Dan, until AIPAC came and sent me a questionnaire, which they do to all people running for Congress. And they said, a lot of questions, do you support the state of Israel and why? And I said, well, its existence, I just wrote it out, its existence may be useful to the United States as a place of staging in case of war. But other than that, I can't think of any reason that my loyalty should shift to the state of Israel. That caused all sorts of problems because I just didn't come out and say without reservation, I support the state of Israel. Listen, friends, I don't support the government of the United States without reservation. I am loyal to my land without reservation, the land the Lord my God has given me. God bless America, land that I love. But my government? I'd take no oath to the government of the United States. Why would I take and proclaim a loyalty to a country on the other side of the earth? Matter of fact, that's called disloyalty, to split your loyalties that way. Boy, do we have good history on that in the Bible and in our common law tradition. But it is, and this I'm quoting from Esther, it says that the Persian to Judaism, comma, for fear of the Jews. That's a quote from the Bible. Esther, chapter 8, verse 17. Such fear of man, however, is at best a lame reason for religious affections and brings a snare. For this reason, Paul the Apostle admonishes, quoting Paul, who was a true Israelite of the tribe of Benjamin and had been a leader, the yellow-haired boy coming up of the Babylonian Pharisees. What did he say to the Philippians? Philippians chapter 3, verse 2, he said, beware of dogs. Beware of the circumcision. That was a well-known way in his day of saying the Jews, because they were the ones that were always getting circumcised. He called them, and he was one of them. He said, beware of the circumcision. They're dangerous. Don't attack them. No, the Bible never says that. Don't imprison them in POW camps. Don't gun them down at sight. Oh, some people have done that. Don't even necessarily expel them from your country. Doesn't say to do that. What does it say to do? Jesus Christ tells us. Avoid them. Just stay away from them. There's no fellowship between darkness, false Babylonian religion, and light, true Christianity, according to the Bible. Dan, I'll read one more paragraph out of this introduction. I think that's long enough for now. We can do another one later. While captive in Babylon, the label Jew, after the tribal name Judah, became tied fast to all the bodily descendants of the man Israel, renamed Israel. His name was Jacob, grandson of Abraham, the Syrian. Regardless of tribe, and this misnomer, Jew, has stuck. However, other Israelite tribesmen, besides the tribe Judah, Benjamites and Ephraimites, for instance, lived in Israel's southern kingdom of land parcel and had also been carted away to Babylon. Such confusion still swells. Nowadays, the label Jew attaches to anyone calling himself Jewish. And who is asking, what proof do you have that you're descended from the man, the grandson of Abraham, renamed Israel? Not only do most present-day Israelis call themselves Jews, at least half of whom are Japhethites, that's sons of the European tribes of Japheth, son of Noah, who fathered the European races. Through Ashkenaz, these are names in the genealogy of the Bible. Japheth was one of the three sons of Noah that came off the ark. He fathered Gomer, Ashkenaz, other men that became the father. Gomer was the father of the southern European races. Ashkenaz was the father of the Germanic and Scandinavian races and the Celtic races. Ashkenazi Jews, those are German or Scandinavian, mostly German Jews. They're not Israelites, they're Germans that have converted to Judaism. But also there are Ethiopians with black skin that have converted to Judaism and are allowed to be citizens of Israel. Persians, during the Book of Esther, millions of Persians converted to Judaism for their protection. They saw the politics change. The followers of Babylonian Judaism in Persia were oppressed, an oppressed race of people. Esther came into power and influence in the courts of Babylon or in the courts of Persia. And then all of a sudden, at the proclamation of the emperor of Persia, because he liked Esther, he was bedding Esther, all of a sudden he was out to protect all the Jews, or all the adherents of Babylonian Judaism. So the Persians saw the politics shift, and they all converted to Judaism. And today there are millions of Persian Jews that are in Israel, have been, many of them, prime ministers of Israel. And they all know that they're not Israelites. They know that they are Persians. Persian Jews, they call themselves. In the face of this confusion, Esther reveals not only God's preservation of the man Israel's blood descendants, but also the beginnings of how God wrought Israelite identity into obscurity using the Persians and their fear of these Israelites, by then called Jews. Dan, that's a background of the Book of Esther and the law of God and how God always keeps his promises. It's quite another question to say, well, why did God do this? So we see him doing it and giving reasons. Jesus Christ tells us in the gospel records. But again, the upshot is that anybody that says they're Israel doesn't have a shred of evidence. God saw to destroying all the genealogical records in 70 AD. The Romans destroyed them all when they burned the temple. The temple was their courthouse where they kept all the records. Nobody has any claim that is good evidence that they can point to that they are a blood descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob through the 12 sons of Jacob. There is just Jewish culture and people claiming it's true. And we get to the book of Revelation and John, a true Israelite, by the way, one of the 12-man jury that Jesus Christ impaneled to witness the evidence of his identity and deliver his verdict. He says this, whoa, that's irreversible doom. It's a Hebrew word put into the Greek letters, but it means irreversible doom. There's nothing you can do once God pronounces it on you. And he's writing the words of God, and he says, woe unto them who say they are Israel, who are not. Revelation chapter 2, verse 9, and chapter 3, verse 9. Well, that's the simplicity of the matter. And there's more to read here, 4 times more to read, and we can do that in another clip, Dan, but I appreciate you sitting by and allowing me to read what I've discovered in the Bible. Do you have any comments you want to make? I want you to make them, of course.
Well, where did it get, and this might be another topic we have to talk to later, but where did it get polluted from Daniel's influence as a captive to where we are at the start of Esther's time? Is that a short answer, or is that a long?
Depends on how much you want to say. It could be 2 days long or 2 minutes, but of course, when they were taken away to Babylon, that's where they overlaid all of their understanding of religion, law, and government with Babylonianism. And then the biblical understanding receded from consideration. And the development of Babylonian religion became what today we call Judaism. Judaism is not controlled by the law of God or any part of the Bible, although they worship the scroll of the Torah. They kiss it. They put it up in front in a prominent position. But they don't have a clue what's in it, and it confuses them. And Jesus Christ made that point too. He said, you err, talking to the Pharisees, the votaries and leaders of Babylonian Judaism. He said, you err, not knowing the scriptures. Don't let people tell you these guys know the Bible better than anybody else. And Jesus Christ said otherwise. And why would they know the scriptures? It's not important to them. What's important to them is the tradition of the elders that they say was delivered through the elders from Moses. And they say, the Talmud and the Mishnah says that the Bible is for women, children, and other mental deficients. So if I'm interested in the Bible, I'm a mental deficient, as are all women and children, it says. That's Babylonian Judaism. No, it has nothing to do with the Bible, but yeah, during that time of the Babylonian captivity, during the times of Daniel the prophet, that's where they learned it. And they brought it back to Jerusalem. And when Jesus Christ met them head on, that's what he was dealing with. That false religion, the law of the city, as opposed to our law of the land, the law of the city of Babylon that developed beginning under the first true emperor in the world by the name of Nimrod and his mother Semiramis. That's a
Thank you.
5-minute answer. 5-minute answer, I think it was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Brent. It's been enlightening, and I'll think of more things to ask about this, but I think we better close it down for the day. And thank you for your time in our discussion with Winters Inn. Thank you again, Brent.
Thank you, Dan.